On today's pod, we're talking Rafael Leão, Thomas Partey, Leandro Trossard, Kepa, Aretha Balaga, Rodrigo, and more. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, Harry Symeou. Let's dive into it. Hey, everybody, how are we doing? Happy Sunday, and welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. How are we all doing? Hope you've all had a great weekend so far. Still most of Sunday to go. If you're with us live, if you're listening to this back a little bit later on, you might have eaten up your Sunday. You might even be listening to this on Monday. But look, it feels like, from day to day now, we're kind of waking up, hoping for these little sort of nuggets of information. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's really, really important that you stay as level-headed and as grounded as you possibly can during, in particular, this stage of a transfer window. Now, we know that the market, the window is going to close temporarily during the Club World Cup, only to reopen again straight after that tournament concludes. But that isn't going to stop there being stories during that period of time. That isn't going to stop the rumors. That isn't going to stop the discussion around who fits who best and where Arsenal need to strengthen and why X player is the answer over Y player and all the rest of it, right? So you got to strap yourselves in for what is going to be, in that sense, a really long old summer. The hope is that Arsenal get the vast majority of their business done pretty early on, which means we then have a really good idea of what our squad looks like. Those players, hopefully, that we're targeting can join in with the rest of the group when they return for pre-season, which we think is around about the 6th or 7th of July. And we can start building up to hopefully a much better campaign than the one we had last time. And I think preparation is a big deal. I think if you look back at last season, you think about our preparation. Obviously, lots of clubs suffered with this, but it was disrupted by the European Championships. We had players that came back into the fold that weren't ready, that probably needed longer in terms of having a break. But you've got to find that balance, haven't you, as a manager, between getting what you need out of your group of players at the time you need it, and also thinking about the sort of medium to longer term, whereby you're sitting there and you're going, well, he needs a break. If I don't give him it now, then am I going to pay for this? And are we going to suffer later on in the season? And a lot of fingers have been pointed at Mikel Arteta in particular for the way some of our players suffered injuries over the course of the season. And I do think, if I'm being brutally honest, we probably as a football club could have done a little bit more to mitigate those risks. We could have done a little bit more to protect ourselves against what eventually happened. But what I will say is that this is a problem that football has, more than it being a problem that Arsenal exclusively have. Think about last night, right? So I didn't watch it because I knew it was going to be dire. I knew it was going to be dreadful. I was on TalkSport 2 on Friday, and we were talking about it. And my response was, do we actually have to talk about this useless game between England and Andorra? Now, with all due respect to Andorra, we know that they're in a different league. We know that they're in a different bracket. So you bring that into the equation, and all of a sudden it's a really unattractive fixture. But even more of a problem than the fact that England and Andorra are worlds apart in terms of resource and players to select from and all the rest of it, is the timing of it all. The timing is horrendous. You knew that despite England's superiority in terms of the players that they can pick and all the rest of it, and the manager and the resource and all the rest of it, you knew that that was going to be a rubbish, dull game. And England won it by a 0-0 and were pretty damn uninspiring. So much so that Thomas Tuchel came out and had a little pop at some of his players, not individually, but obviously talked about the team not being sort of at the level required and all the rest of it. But can you blame them? Like, the season's finished. So many of their colleagues, friends, teammates are sitting on a beach somewhere with their feet up. And these guys are being forced to go and play these really sort of uninteresting and dull football matches that very few people have got an interest in. I mean, tonight we've got the UEFA Nations League final between Spain and Portugal. Now, that's okay. As a player, I'm sure it's a bit easier to kind of motivate yourself. In fact, a lot easier to motivate yourself when there's an opportunity to win a trophy with your country. And we've seen in those two Nations League semi-finals, okay, I still think that international football has fallen way behind sort of club football, and the standard is nowhere near the same. But especially that Spain-France game, that's entertaining. People would tune in and watch that. And if there's that interest and buzz around the game, it helps you as a player get motivated. And as I say, there is a trophy there to be won. That's fine. But do we really need to be playing some of these other games? I know some of them are qualifiers, some of them are friendlies. I know that there's a whole mishmash of different things going on, and we got lots of competitions and lots of things that we need to do, and lots of boxes to tick and all the rest of it. But I just think we're at a place where these players are completely dead on their feet, and they don't want to be playing these games. They really don't. It's like you grow up as a kid in a lot of cases. So it's probably been the case for so many of us, and you want to be a footballer. Well, those are the types of games that probably make you not want to be a footballer. Like, I know every job has the rough and the smooth and the good and the bad and all the rest of it, but it's just, yeah, it's so demoralizing. And I didn't even watch the game, but just sort of reading some of the analysis of it afterwards and some of the reaction to it. I mean, I could have told you that was coming from a week ago, genuinely. Like, I'm not surprised in the slightest. But anyway, we're going to keep it Arsenal here on the Chronicles of Aguna today, and we're going to talk contract extensions. We're going to talk a little bit about a wide option that has become available, according to some reports coming out of Italy. We'll discuss Rafael Leao's suitability to the Arsenal. Is he suitable at all? We'll get into all of that. We'll also bring you the latest on Rodrygo, the latest on Kepa, and we'll cover off anything else that you guys want to hear discussed in the live chat box as well. So let's dive into those contract negotiations, because I think that's a really good place to start. Obviously, all the talk around this summer is about who's going to come in. What fresh faces can Arsenal, Mikel Arteta and Andrea Berta bring in through the door? But we've got a lot of work to do in the renewals department as well. And I think that at times has become a bit of a side story when actually it's really, really important to our plans. We heard the other day that Big Gabby had renewed his contract. That was all official. That was great news. And we talked about the significance and importance of that. We've been hearing for a while that Leandro Trossard is locked in talks with the club at the moment over an improved deal. Now, this is an interesting one because we heard initially that the talks were going to be centered around actually offering the Belgian improved terms that maybe better reflect his role within the squad, rather than them being centered around significantly extending his stay at the club. And I think that's the right thing. I think for me, if you're talking about bringing in a left winger, the one that you probably move on from is Leandro Trossard. I think he's a better finisher than Gabriel Martinelli. And I think if we had one chance in a game, I'd much rather it fell to him than actually quite a few of our attacking players. But I think with his age, I think the fact that he's been in and out of the side and all the rest of it, it means that, look, I value him and I think he brings a lot, but I don't think he's indispensable. I'm not saying Martinelli is necessarily indispensable, but I think Martinelli ticks a lot more of at least Mikel Arteta's boxes in terms of what he can do off the ball. And I think that plays a big part in why he maintains a significant role in the group. But I'm just wondering if, all this talk about bringing in a winger is causing a delay with the Trossard stuff. Now, it might not be. It might just be me sort of I wouldn't say panicking, because I'm pretty relaxed actually about what Leandro Trossard's future looks like, whichever way it goes. But I think for me, I'm just wondering how, you navigate this as a football club if your plan is to go out and bring in a top winger. Because it's, okay, you want numbers and you want depth. And we learned the hard way last season that really you can never have too many options, can you? But yeah, I'm just interested to see if this chat about Rodrygo and Williams and some of the others we've been linked with, Anthony Gordon, for example, Antoine Semenyo. I just wonder if that's having a bearing on this Trossard stuff, and if the reason we haven't heard of any progress on this yet is to do with maybe some of those transfer plans. I don't know. On Thomas Partey, this is a really, really interesting one, because Arsenal, according to a report yesterday from Ryan Taylor, I think, said that Arsenal had made a competitive contract offer to Thomas Partey around about 10 days ago. And as far as we're aware, there's still no agreement in place. Now, this is a really, really important renewal for me. This is more important than the Trossard negotiation discussion. It's not quite as important, I don't think, as Big Gabby signing on, and it's not as important as the ongoing talks with Saliba and Saka and Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly and all the rest of it. But this is really important in terms of our plans for this summer. Because let me tell you this, if we don't renew Thomas Partey's contract, if Thomas Partey is to leave us, we've got even more work to do in the midfield. And bringing in Martin Zubimendi alone is not going to be enough. We can't allow Thomas Partey to leave without spending significant amounts of money in the midfield on top of what we're about to spend on Martin Zubimendi. Does that then take away from what we can use in the attacking third? It might do. I don't know for sure, but it might do. So I think for me, this is a really, really important negotiation. And although, for a long time we've heard that Thomas Partey's desire is to remain at the club, that he's happy in London, that his family are happy here, that he doesn't want to move on, you can't help but worry. You can't help but be concerned by the fact that he's apparently received this contract offer 10 days ago, a very competitive contract offer, and we've not heard anything with regards to any progress being made. Now, I said to you from the beginning that if I were Thomas Partey's representatives, I'd be going out there and I'd be offering my client up to different clubs. Even if I had no intention of sending my client or sort of facilitating a deal for my client to go abroad, I would go to some of the big hitters, some of the clubs that would potentially be interested, and I'd get offers from them. And the reason I'd do that, or at least an indication of what they'd be willing to pay, because you can come back to Arsenal with those figures, and that puts you on a really strong footing in terms of those conversations and those negotiations. I don't blame them for wanting to get the best possible deal for their client. If they weren't trying to do that, if they weren't active in that goal, then they wouldn't be doing right by their client. So that's going to happen, okay? But it feels to me like this is dragging on a bit. And if we knew that we were going to bring in Martin Zubimendi from months ago, which is how it looks, we heard about it in January, didn't we? If we knew that he was coming in, and we also knew that Jorginho was going to go, which again we've heard about for a long, long time, we had to be either putting a replacement in place for the potential of losing Thomas Partey as well, or making sure that we got going with these contract negotiations nice and early. Now, from what we've heard, Arsenal didn't do this very early. Arsenal weren't very proactive with this. It took until the final few weeks of the season for Arsenal to even start a dialogue with Thomas Partey, allegedly. Of course, these are reports, but we can only go by what we read. If no one comes out and tells you anything different, that's what you're going to go by, right? So I just feel like this is such an important negotiation, and the longer it goes on without us making a breakthrough or having any progress, the more concerned and worried I'm going to be. I don't think we've got an unlimited pot of money. I don't think that we're going to spend big again in midfield on top of the Martin Zubimendi deal. And obviously, there's a real desire from so many of us to go and see Arsenal bring in not just the centre-forward option that we want, but also a wide option that can help us as well. And we know that those are probably the two most expensive positions in football to recruit for, because they're game changers, they're difference makers, they're goal scorers. So look, maybe these people are just doing their bit in terms of dotting the I's and crossing the T's and trying to use a Mikel Arteta phrase, squeeze as much out of the lemon as possible. And if they are doing that, fair enough, that's their job and that's their right to. But I feel like we really need to get this one wrapped up nice and soon so that we have clarity around the rest of our transfer plans. Now, internally, there might be a very, very strong view that actually, yep, it's taking a bit of time, but this is heading in the right direction. We know that they feel that way about the Saliba talks, the Saka talks. Looks like they're quite confident that both Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri are going to sign on as well. So, internally, the mood might be different. Internally, it might be, well, you know what, our plans are in place and we're pretty confident we're going to keep Thomas Partey, so we're going to move forward with those plans. But externally, it feels like it's something we really ought to execute a little bit quicker in order to give us some comfort with regards to what Arsenal are doing on this. So I'm not saying he's going to leave. I still think the most likely outcome is that he remains. But obviously, the longer this goes on, the more nervy people are going to feel. And I think people recognize and acknowledge that without Thomas Partey, having lost Jorginho as well, the recruitment of Martin Zubimendi is not enough. And then you have to go into the market and find another top-class midfielder. And unfortunately, there aren't that many around that you would say are affordable or available at this moment. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on those contract negotiations that are currently ongoing. We heard yesterday that Arsenal's pursuit of Kepa Arrizabalaga from Chelsea had moved into the final stages. Arsenal really accelerating on this over the course of the last 24 hours. That was what was reported yesterday. So I would say you can expect to hear more on Kepa very, very shortly. I think he's someone that will come in and bring some experience, some know-how, who, again, we talk a lot about floor raisers and ceiling raisers, raises the floor, because I don't think there are going to be many better second choice goalkeepers out there. And to pick him up for £5 million, to take him on a reduced wage, I think it makes a lot of sense. And the reason I say reduced wage is because a lot of people were kind of floating this number around over the course of the last few days when this became a thing, a number that reflected what Kepa Arrizabalaga was earning at Chelsea when they first signed him, for north of £70 million. When he signed the latest extension with Chelsea, the one that had the £5 million release clause in it, there was a significant wage drop there. So we're not taking him on from a mega wage and then having to continue that at our end. He's on a much more reasonable wage now. Not sure exactly what it is. I've read some reports that it's around about 100K a week. But, you know, my understanding is that it is a very competitive wage, but not one that, you know, really kind of would in any way, shape or form put the cat among the pigeons and cause any maybe problems internally. I know that's what people were worried about. They were saying, well, you can't bring in this goalkeeper who's on a bigger salary than David Raya and ask him to play second fiddle to David Raya and expect our number one to be okay with that. That is not the case. And I think you'll hear more on this deal very, very soon, as Arsenal work very, very hard behind the scenes to wrap this one up. Okay, short pause. And when we come back, we're going to get into the Rafael Leão stuff. We're also going to take some of your thoughts and questions from the live chat, so keep them coming. If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and all the rest of it. We'll be back in just a moment with more Arsenal transfer chat.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
Interestingly, as well, I said we'll move on from the whole Kepa stuff, but I just wanted to touch on one point, because a lot of people have been sort of crediting this deal to Andrea Berta. I think the general consensus on this is that for what we're paying, for what, you know, he's achieved, or for what he is in terms of what we've come to know over the years, actually this represents a smart bit of business, if not a majorly exciting bit of business. But a lot of people have gone, well, look, Andrea Berta's come in, and look, we've brought in this experienced goalkeeper on the cheap, and it's a really good bit of business. I'm kind of reluctant to say it's one person or the other that was really the driving force behind this. We know that Inaki Kanya and Arsenal's goalkeeping staff have been big fans of Kepa Arrizabalaga for a while. So that interest probably already existed and probably predates Andrea Berta. Has he played a part in maybe getting this done nice and quickly and accelerating it pretty quickly? Possibly, but I'm just wary of going down this road of saying, look, X person has taken this on and done that. And I used to say the same thing about Edu. You know, there'll be times where we couldn't shift a player for love nor money because they were on a mega contract that Edu had nothing to do with, that was given to them previously. And there just wasn't enough interest out there to kind of generate any sort of bidding war in order to try and drive the selling price up. So I'm very wary of pinning these things to individuals at this time, unless we know otherwise, or we hear otherwise in terms of the reporting. But anyway, that's enough about him. Let's talk Rafael Leão. So according to Florian Plettenberg, Rafael Leão has informed AC Milan that he wants to leave. Now, these are reports that are being backed up by some outlets in Italy as well. He's a player that's been talked about as a potential outgoing for Milan for quite some time now, because there is a feeling that Rafael Leão could go on to bigger and better things. And Milan are in a mess, let's be honest. They haven't had a great season at all. They're not going to play in Europe, which for a club of that size is a complete and utter travesty. Whatever the level, there is no European football in the red and black half of San Siro next season, which for them is a huge, huge disappointment. Rafael Leao's obviously been there a little while now. He's, I feel, been waiting for this project to go boom. There was a period where they were picking up really young, talented players, but they're losing some of those now. It looks like Mike Maignan is going to be on his way to Chelsea. It looks like Reinders is about to have his medical at Manchester City. So Milan are being raided at the moment, and you can understand why Rafael Leão thinks it's probably time to abandon the ship. Before we go into the stats around the player and we look at him in a little bit more detail, just my kind of general view on Rafael Leão is, on his day, he's a handful. He's physically very, very good. He's powerful. He's strong. He's shown that he can finish. He's shown that he can cause real havoc in the opposition's defensive third. We know he's capable of those things on his day. My problem with Rafael Leão has always been that those days, perhaps for a top level player, which is what he's regarded as in a lot of people's eyes, they don't come often enough. And then I think about the price, which I think is quite high. I think about how I felt in the past watching Rafael Leão as not a Milan fan, but as someone that quite likes Milan. And when I do follow Serie A, I am a neutral, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for Milan, right? They're probably the team that I've gravitated towards since I was a kid in the Italian football sphere. And so I've watched him at times in games that I've wanted them to come out on top in and win, and been so frustrated with him. I don't know if I could take another one of those players at Arsenal. Like, I feel that way sometimes with Gabriel Martinelli in terms of when he squanders chances or maybe doesn't make the right decisions in the final third. Felt that way in the past about people like Theo Walcott, with all due respect to him and everything he achieved. I'm not sure that I want that kind of player again. And I feel like this would be the classic case of Arsenal prioritizing physicality and power over some of the other aspects of the game. And listen, I've said this about Serie A before, and I'll say it again because I think this is a really important point when assessing or judging whether somebody like Rafael Leão could come to Arsenal and do the business. In the Serie A, generally speaking, the physical level is lower than what it is in the Premier League. The tempo of the game is slower. That's not to say it's bad in Italy. I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the most, in fact, the most probably entertaining league on the planet right now. I love it. So I'm not seeking to discredit it in any way, shape, or form. But I think there are some players that they go to the Serie A. Rafael Leão is a good example. Romelu Lukaku is a good example. Scott McTominay is another good example. Players that maybe physically are sort of 8, 9s out of 10, but technically are sort of just in the bracket below. You see their physicality and ability to dominate in that sense really prop them up when they play in Serie A and show them off essentially as world beaters. When you bring them to the Premier League, where that physical advantage is not as big an advantage anymore because of the competition and what you're up against, these players, I think, fall into that kind of middle ground again, rather than look like standout players. And Rafael Leão screams of that. Give the ball to Rafael Leão down the left-hand side in Italy. See him set off like a steam train, and essentially defenders bouncing off him as he takes the ball down the left-hand side and charges in towards the opposition penalty area. Put him in the Premier League, I don't think he's going to be able to do that with the same ease. And therefore, I don't think he is as valuable. Do you see what I mean? And we've seen examples of it, right? Like Romelu Lukaku, when he was in the Premier League, he scored a fair amount of goals, to be fair to him. But all everybody ever focused on was the heavy touch, was the squandering of certain chances. Go to Italy and you get loads more chances because you are powerful enough to create situations for yourself. And you're going to score more goals and your record is going to look better. And people that look at you just on the surface level are going to say, well, wow, you're really impactful. But watching you every week is a different thing. And it gives you a real understanding of what a player is all about. Rafael Leão, I'm telling you now, if he came to Arsenal, would frustrate the living daylights out of us on occasions. There'd also be occasions where we come away from Emirates Stadium thinking, bloody hell, what a player. Look what we've signed. I'm not totally convinced by this. And then you factor in the price, and it's said in this report from Florian Plettenberg that AC Milan would be looking for at least 70 million euros. If you translate that into pounds or exchange that into pounds, it looks around about 59, 60 million quid. He's going to want a big salary, no question about that. I'm just not sure that he is the one I would be pushing for. Like, if you're going to pay 70 million euros for him, but you can get Rodrigo for 80, 85, potentially, I'm going down the Rodrigo route every single day of the week. Let's take some of your thoughts and comments on this, because we will go in and have a look at some of the statistics and metrics around Rafael Leão as well. Junior Gunner says, Leão gives me Rashford vibes. Physically and speed above most, very direct and capable of producing moments, but very inconsistent and lazy out of possession. I think he can be lazy out of possession. And I don't think that would be accepted at Arsenal. And that could be another potential sticking point here. You're right. It's a pretty good assessment, I think, of the player. Kevin says, Ruben Loftus-Cheek stood out. Yeah, you've seen it a lot, haven't you? You've seen a lot of players go over there and look like world beaters when in the Premier League they look very, very average. And again, that's not to downplay the quality on show in Serie A or anything like that. It is about just understanding that different leagues have different characteristics, and certain players' strengths will really prop them up in one environment, but maybe don't in another. And I think it's really important that you think about that when trying to decide how these players' form could translate from one league to the other. Terry says he's distracted on and off the pitch. I don't know about off the pitch so much, but he does appear distracted on the pitch a lot of the time. The DJ Sweet says, Harry, who in the current Arsenal side is consistent? We don't have enough consistent players. That's exactly the problem. And that's the issue that we're trying to solve this summer. In that final third, going by last season's evidence, Bukayo Saka was consistent. Kai Havertz was kind of consistent before picking up that injury. Not enough as he could have been or probably should have been, but Martinelli wasn't, Trossard wasn't, Odegaard wasn't, Rice wasn't really contributing in an attacking sense in the early part and first half of the season. I'd go as far as saying. So you're right to make that point. But, if you're trying to say, like, I'm maybe being a bit harsh on Rafael Leão, then I think you're kind of misconstruing what I'm saying. My point here is not that everyone that we have is consistent. It's that we need to add consistency. And so picking someone who I don't think is consistent enough to come in and potentially be the solution to that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Remit the Frog says, this is a philosophical argument. People said this about Kvara. It's very simple. Do you see his work rate good enough or not? Personally, I doubt it. Listen, Kvaratskhelia is on another planet to Rafael Leão, in my opinion. The two are not even comparable. One is an unbelievable footballer, rounded, brilliant footballer. And the other is someone who's shown flashes and produced moments, but doesn't do it anywhere near consistently enough. If you told me we're going to spend 70 million quid on Kvaratskhelia, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I was massively campaigning for signing him in January. I know that he already had this agreement in place with PSG, and it was always heading that way. And there probably wasn't a great deal that we could have done about it. But I said that we had, and I remember doing the pod at the time, I said that we had a responsibility to try. That's how good this guy is. And so he was playing in the Serie A, but you can see it from then. You could see it from there. That is a player over whom I'd have no concerns about him translating his form from one league to the other. Because when you're that good, it doesn't really matter. You adapt, you adjust. Lots of people talking about Kudus as well in the chat. I mean, maybe we'll come on to that a little bit later. But again, he's another one that I think falls into the same category for me in terms of a little bit inconsistent. Anyway, let's go over to FB Ref and have a little bit of a look into Rafael Leão and what some of his recent metrics and stuff tell us about the player. Here we go. So if we have a look into this, non-penalty goals, per 90 minutes, 0.32. Is that a high enough rate for you? I'm not sure. He falls in the 69th percentile. In percentile-wise, it's not too bad. But, it's not a goal-scoring record that massively inspires. Non-penalty XG is 0.28. So he's in the 68th percentile for that. Shots total, he manages on average 2.37 shots per game. That puts him in the 63rd percentile. For me, in these metrics, you've got to be in the 75th percentile or above for me to say, you're there, you're the one, or you're in that group of players that we're talking about as being the one. But at the same time, I also recognize that stats don't always tell the full story. My opinion on Rafael Leão is based on partly these stats, but largely based on what I've seen. I've got to be honest with you. In terms of expected assisted goals, he's in the 85th percentile for that. So, he does create chances for people. And that comes a lot of the time from him being this really powerful steam train type player coming down the left-hand side, attracting defenders in and then picking people out in more central areas. And I did say earlier on in the week that I think we do need a bit more of a kind of maverick type player. Rafael Leão, I guess, is that. You don't know what you're going to get from him from one week to the next. But yeah, he's not the full package for me. Progressive carries, 4.74 per game. He's in the 79th percentile for that. Successful take-ons. This is key for me. Successful take-ons. 2.83 per game, but that puts him in the 95th percentile. So only 5% of his peers are more effective at beating defenders in those 1v1 situations. Touches in the attacking penalty area, 6.15, 85th percentile. That's positive. Progressive passes received, 10.63 on average per 90 minutes. So again, he's in an 85th percentile there. So in terms of those stats, he looks good, but he's not quite hitting the top level when it comes to XG and stuff. So, take it as you will. Aerials, 80th percentile. So if you wanted to stick the ball out onto that left-hand side and ask him to challenge for it in the way that we sometimes do with our wingers, I think he could be quite effective there. Look, I think there's a lot to like about Rafael Leão, but is he the answer for us? No. I feel like this is a really, really, really difficult window for us, but not because of money, not because of all of that stuff. I'll let the club worry about that. Nothing to do with that. But the reason I say this is a difficult window, and I very much stick by that opinion, is because there is a lot to do in terms of improving us, because we all feel pretty down in the dumps about the way last season unraveled. We all have a clear idea, I believe, of what those needs are. You asked me today, I'm going to tell you we need a goalkeeper. Looks like we're getting Kepa. I'm going to tell you that we need another midfielder if we don't sign up Partey. If we do sign up Partey, then Zubimendi coming in to replace Georgie is fine. I'm going to tell you that we need a striker, and I'm going to tell you that we probably need a left winger. So we all have a clear understanding of what in our own minds we think this team needs. But when you progress the way that we've progressed over the last few years, and obviously we're not there yet, and that's why there is that sense of frustration. There aren't as many players out there anymore that will lift the level of your team. And so, yeah, there's a smaller pool of players available to you that genuinely do improve your team. And because it's such a small pool of players, those players become really, really expensive, and those deals become really difficult to do. So you end up in a situation where you're still gambling. You're just gambling at a much higher valued table. It's like going into a casino, going up to the roulette table. Minimum bet is, £5. Well, now it's £20, because the only players that fall into the bracket that really would improve us are players that clubs really desperately want to hold on to. And clubs will know the position we're in and we're shopping from, and they are going to push those prices up as much as they possibly can. So this window is where you're going to really judge how good Arsenal's recruitment is. I feel like the recruitment's been good up to this point, but while we were on that journey going upwards and upwards and upwards, you were looking at it and you were going, okay, there's a lot of hits here. There's a few misses, but, we're going for a transitional process and we can just move those players off to the side and we can continue on our journey. Now you're in the realm where you're spending big money on whoever you bring in. And so the deals have to be right. The vast majority of them have to come off and have to improve you. And maybe, just maybe, Andrea Berta is going to allow us and help us to make that shift from trying to sign potential and players that can grow and develop with us to players now that are going to improve the team. And in the most difficult of negotiations, as I've just explained, it is probably beneficial to have someone that's been around the block and that's done these types of negotiations over and over and over again. Edu was the right guy for the time and for the remit at that point. Now Andrea Berta is here. Hopefully we get over the line and hopefully he takes us forward. Let's see what else we've got in the live chat before we touch on a couple more points. I can't believe someone in the chat said Kvaratskhelia is rubbish. Come on, man. Jesus. Fays says Rafael Leão has more impressive statistics than Rodrigo. I don't know that's true, but if it is, I'll go back to the point that I made a little bit earlier on, which is it's not just about what the stats tell you. The stats should form a part of your picture and a part of your idea on a player, but they shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. And Rafael Leão, I'm telling you, there are things that he doesn't do so well that, people maybe see a highlight reel here and there or look at the statistics and perhaps are then unable to see maybe the shortcomings of the player as well. I'm a real gunner says Zubi isn't coming in to replace Jorginho. He's there to replace Partey. Partey replaced you. Yeah, okay. You're going down technicalities here. And I also think a bit like I've been talking about this with the centre forward situation. I've been saying that if Cesco comes in, I still think Havertz starts the season at centre forward. Well, I think if Zubimendi comes in, there's a good chance that if Partey renews, Partey starts the season. I think having those players around not only gives us depth, but it allows us to maintain a really high level without placing too much pressure on these new guys to come in and do it straight away. Now, obviously, they're big money signings and they're players that are going to need to improve us and are going to need to show their value and their worth. But having that luxury of being able to just share that role at the beginning with someone who's already in it and doing really well, I think is a nice dynamic actually to have. But anyway, SP says that Leão is lazy. He's brilliant, but lazy, end of. I think a lot of people feel that he can be lazy at times for sure. But as I say, not for me, Rafael Leão. It's not the answer. It's not the solution. We also talked about how the window is tough because, so many of these targets I'm on the fence about as to whether or not they actually improve us. But yeah, anyway, we'll move on from that. Let me take a couple more questions before I sign out, just to let you know, we've got a Patreon piece dropping in about an hour's time as well, where we did some video scouting on Benjamin Cesco. So come over to Patreon, patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below, and you can join us over there and get access to that in about an hour's time. It's all ready to go. I just need to edit this once we finish the live stream, put this out, and then I'll get on to sharing that with you all as well. Where are we at in terms of likes right now? If you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, guys. It really, really does help. I hate asking, but when I do, I see a significant improvement in the result. So hence why I'm going to continue to do that. Sorry, as annoying as it is. We got 90 likes on the board. It's over 500 of you with us right now. Let's get that up to at least 250. Come on, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Okay, let's take some of your questions and thoughts from the live chat then. So, Cass says, I just have this feeling Arsenal will sign someone we didn't expect. You know what? I'm not ruling that out either. And it's why I keep advising against getting too attached to transfer rumors, because you can get into this world where you watch so much and consume so much content around a certain player, you almost convince yourself that they're the one without taking into consideration there could be other options out there. And at the end of the day, if your club then don't land that player, you feel a sense of deflation. And why should you? They might have gone and got someone that is even better suited. So who knows? I'm a real gunner says, Harry, people think Cesco is a risk. Wasn't Haaland? Yeah, Haaland was to a degree, but Haaland had a much better track record prior to coming to the Premier League than Benjamin Cesco did in terms of outputs. And Haaland was ripping it up in Austria, ripping it up in Germany, and ripping it up on a whole different level, goal scoring wise, to Benjamin Cesco. Just go back and look at the numbers. But also in the Champions League as well. Cesco's had his moments in the Champions League, but I don't think that Cesco is anywhere near as far down the progression line as Erling Haaland was when Manchester City brought him in. So, yeah, look, there's always an element of risk, yes, but I think the Cesco transfer is a much bigger risk than the Haaland one for sure. Just on that point about unexpected signings, Russ is absolutely right when he says no one expected Kepa. There you go. We heard about it a couple of days ago, and lo and behold, Arsenal are very, very close now to completing that, and it hasn't taken a long time at all. Jay says, Harry, if you had to guess now, what winger do you think will sign? Do you want me to be completely and brutally honest about this? And I know that this is going to go down like a lead balloon. I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal didn't get a winger. Now, I think we need one. And if it were me, I'd certainly be looking to address that position. But there's a part of me that looks at it and goes, if they're going to spend big on the centre forward, if they're bringing in Martin Zubimendi, if they're bringing in Kepa Arrizabalaga, I think they might look at a defender as well. We've heard reports linking us with Howson. Obviously, he's gone off to Real Madrid now, but obviously that means Arsenal are interested in a centre-back. We lost Tierney, probably going to lose Zinchenko. I just wonder if Arsenal are going to look at bringing in a defender. And I know this is going to wind people up and annoy people, and I'm not trying to kind of plant a seed of annoyance, but I don't feel like we're dead set on any of the wide targets that have been talked about so far. So unless we go and sign someone left field, I think we're going to find this a really difficult position to address without really paying over the top. And there's only a select few players that I would really pay over the top. Like, let's go through some of the names, right, that we've been talking about. Anthony Gordon. Really like the player, but how the hell much are Newcastle United going to demand from us to sell him? Hell of a lot. I think Antoine Semenyo, I'm not massively convinced by, but you'd be talking 50, 60 million pound at the absolute minimum to get him. Nico Williams, I'm not convinced by, and I also don't like his salary demands. There's just so many wingers that we're being linked with that just for me feel like massive risks and massive gambles. Rodrygo feels like as close to a sure thing as you can get, but can we make that happen given what that is going to take financially? So I'm not as convinced we're going to sign a winger as I am convinced we're going to get that striker in. And therefore, I wouldn't be massively surprised if we went through the window without bringing one in. Flashlight Junkie says, Harry, would you take any player from the relegated teams? Not really. I've got to be honest that no one's particularly caught my attention. I think El Canous at Leicester was being talked about a bit. And if there was one player I probably would move for from the relegated three, not necessarily for us, but if I was another Premier League club, it probably would have been Liam Delap, and obviously he's gone to Chelsea. But those teams were just so far off it, weren't they, this season? Yeah, we'll see. Jid says, Harry, I think you're so stuck in your ways with your opinion on Cesco. What have I even said about Cesco today? That it reminds me of the Kivior situation. When you aren't sold on a player, you seem to double down more and more. Well, it means I'm being authentic and genuine in my opinion. Like, what do you want me to do? Because it sounds like we're progressing with talks for Benjamin Cesco. Do you want me to flip my opinion on the player upside down and start putting out Cesco PR, as some people would call it in the chat box? Like, I don't really understand what the issue is. My opinion is my opinion. And if someone does something or something happens to change my opinion, you've seen before that I'm more than happy to adjust in it on that basis. Jakub Kivior, who you mentioned, came in at the back end of last season, played in games against Real Madrid, PSG, and for me was fantastic. And my opinion on Jakub Kivior is much higher than it was 6 months ago. Not a problem. I'm happy for that to change, especially in the way of it benefiting the football club. If someone improves and someone does well, I'll be the first to sing their praises and give them the credit they deserve. But with Cesco, I think what I think about him, and until he comes in to this Arsenal setup and shows me otherwise, I'm going to stay around about that opinion point. But at least that shows that my opinion is genuine. I could very easily, knowing now that Arsenal are engaged in talks, I could easily put out content every day. 5 reasons why Benjamin Cesco improves Arsenal. What does Benjamin Cesco bring to the table? Benjamin Cesco is going to fire us to the Premier League. I could do all of that stuff, but then I wouldn't be giving you my true opinion on the player at this stage. I'm not saying it can't change, it won't change, or it shouldn't change, but we'll have to wait and see. And also, we've got a scouting bit, a video piece, which you can watch on our Patreon page, coming out in about an hour's time, that I think you'll find interesting. Because although I have my opinion on Benjamin Cesco and his readiness to take Arsenal to that next step and next level right now, I do think he's got a lot of strengths, which we talk about and go into on that video. Jasper says, we can't not bring in a winger. If Saka has a recurrence of his hamstring injury and Martinelli and Trossard are as bad as last year, we're in the same position. I agree with you. I think it's a really, really important position to address. But I'm just looking at the options. We're not really hearing anything concrete in the way that we are, for example, about Cesco, about any of these wingers. I'm just saying I don't think we're as far down the line in terms of bringing in a winger as maybe people want us to be. If we're still exploring our options, fine. I think it's imperative that we get one, but I wouldn't also be surprised if we don't get one as well. Because in Arteta's mind, he might say, well, Nwaneri can play as a winger. So I've got Nwaneri and Saka on the right. I got Trossard and Martinelli on the left. I've got Max Dowman coming in, who's an attacking-minded player. I've got Kai Havertz back now, who, if he's not playing at centre forward every week, I'm going to want to get into the team somewhere else. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Let's move on. Just rolling through the chat box and picking out one or two more before we sign off. Here we go. Ian Roy says, would you be comfortable with Kepa starting 35% of Arsenal games? That's the number of games Keller has started for Liverpool last season. Right now, probably not, because, listen, I said it on the show that we did yesterday. We did a bonus pod on Kepa yesterday. I said, as much as I think he's a good and experienced option and can bring a lot to the table, I'm not going to pretend that he hasn't made loads of errors in the past and that he hasn't become a meme at times in his Premier League career to date. That side of Kepa does exist, and we've got to acknowledge that. But I also think with goalkeepers, so like, for example, with Quaveen Kelleher, who you mentioned there, I think with goalkeepers, the more they play, the better. When they don't play for a long time and then they come in cold, I think that's quite difficult to do. Probably more so than most other positions. So I think goalkeepers find it difficult when they're on the sidelines, out in the cold, and then called upon and expected to perform at a really high level. I suppose the point I'm trying to make here is that on the surface of that question, would I be happy with him starting 35% of Arsenal's games? My answer is no. But although that number sounds quite high, the more games he plays, the more comfortable you'd feel, because you'd imagine, because it's generally the case with goalkeepers, the more he plays, the better his form gets, the more familiar he becomes with the players he's playing with and all the rest of it. So although you don't want the number to be too high because you've got a very clear number one at Arsenal, you also have to acknowledge that the higher the number is in terms of games and minutes played, the more likely you are to get the best version of Kepa Arrizabalaga. So that's kind of how I see that. Let's take this super chat. Thank you so much to Faye for your very, very, very kind donation. He says, we need Lookman because we need a goal-scoring winger. We need over 90 goals to win the league. We need to add 20 goals next season. Yeah, but we do. But those 20 goals can come from a combination of Benjamin Cesco, Havertz and Saka being fit and available for the whole season, Martinelli adding 3-4 more, Trossard adding 3-4 more. Do you see what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't go and bring these players in, but I really do believe that when Mikel Arteta looks at the goal scoring output, let's not forget that all this time when we were saying we needed a striker and that was our problem, we were breaking records in terms of the volume of goals we were scoring in a Premier League campaign. So rather than focus on one player or how you can get that out of one person, I think you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the collective and the wider issue, which is that 3 or 4 players last season who had otherwise produced very good numbers fell off a cliff. And maybe it was because they were overplayed. Maybe it was because they were over-relied upon because of the injuries we had and all the rest of it. But that is the bigger problem for me. And so, yes, bring in the striker that we all want to see, but make sure that you're managing to extract greater outputs from those that we have in other areas as well, because that's going to be the key to me. That's going to be the key. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on another live edition of the pod. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Remember, Patreon piece dropping in about an hour's time. So sign up to Patreon if you're interested, and you'll get access to that. We can do things that we can't do on YouTube over on Patreon for copyright reasons and various other bits and pieces. So, yeah, come over, check that out. Really looking forward to sharing that with you and getting a bit of feedback on it as well, because it's the first one of its kind on this channel. Leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Can we get up to a couple of 100 likes before I click the end stream button? There's certainly enough of you watching to achieve that with our eyes closed. Have a great day. Have a fantastic Sunday. We'll be back later if anything major breaks. Otherwise, I'll speak to you guys tomorrow. Enjoy the Nations League final. It's an opportunity to have another look at the incoming Martin Zubimendi. I'll see you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.